Civilization VI, or Civ 6, has been out for 6 years, and despite being out for almost as long as the time between each epic rap battle of history video, there are still 5 major problems that still plague the game. It's time to put on my Bob the Builder cosplay attire and fix these 5 glaring problems in Civilization VI. Because I know I'm going to get this first Civilization VI problem in the comments immediately, I'll just start with it. The multiplayer in this game is about as reliable as World of Warcraft over dial-up internet. Not very. The problems in multiplayer are a lot. It's mainly focused around single player, finding 8 people willing to sit for days at a time, not being able to finish a game because of that one guy who wants to wait to the last possible second every turn, or even different technical problems like disconnects or not being able to connect in the first place. Time to find a game, and even games being ruined after just one player leaves because his neighbor's just gonna gobble up all the cities and take over. Now, let's take a look at each of these mini problems and how I would fix each one to hopefully make the game more enjoyable. For Axis, I give you full permission to use these ideas as long as I get 69 or 96% of all sales of Civ 6 from now on. Add in Civ 5 while you're at it too. The first problem is having to find 8 people who are willing to sit for hours on end while making the game go fast enough to not get people bored. This seems almost unsolvable as long as we keep going by single player rules, because there's no way you're going to get a majority of the player base to last 8 hours required of any game, so we need to change that. The multiplayer, that is. For that, I have an idea. Split multiplayer into different categories based on era. Instead of having a game last throughout the entirety of human history, make it sort of like Age of Empires. Not 4. Good God, anything but Age of Empires 4. But have the game focused on one specific era. And have the victory types like science, cultures, diplomatic, based on the specific era. Now, obviously building spaceports in the classical era isn't very immersive, so science victory can be whoever researches every tech first, and have, at the end of the ancient to industrial era games, require one hugely expensive tech that can be just renamed Victory Tech or whatever. After you research it, you win the game. You don't really need to fix domination. In fact, it might be better, as one era means you could just build an army without having to worry about upgrading units, and instead make domination based more on strategy and skill than whoever has the bigger stick. Scale culture down and get great writer, artist, musician points faster with maybe more work slots somewhere else. Diplomatic victory can be just the same, except it starts earlier and you might only need, I guess, 10 points or something, with the world leader vote being from the first Diplo session. This, in my opinion, is the best option. Domination and religion really does not need any changes, as having quicker games that last 2 hours at most makes it a lot less likely for someone to leave or something like that. Finally, I'm no scientist, I have not been graced with Isaac Newton's genetics, so I have no idea how the technical aspect works, but I'm fairly certain it is possible to make the game a lot more stable, considering we have games like League of Legends, Call of Duty, Fortnite even, where there are over 100 people who can connect and stay connected with relative stability. So all in all, these are the fixes that would make multiplayer more popular, and hopefully with maybe even some incentives, it would make multiplayer a thriving scene on Civ 6. The fourth Civ 6 problem is the snowball mechanic, and I'm not talking about that small snowball fight you'd have with friends in middle school. I'm talking about a big, beefy, juicy, deadly weapon that could send you to a Kurt Cobain concert in seconds. When you get going, you are absolutely unstoppable, and that's the moment the game becomes unfun to play. Whenever a game is too easy, it isn't even worth playing, especially considering the grind it takes at the later stages to actually win the game after you have everything set up and really have nothing to do, whether it be science, culture, or even Diplo. The Golden Age mechanic was supposed to fix this, but you can only really get Golden Ages through luck or through actually getting super strong, which leads to the snowball in the first place. So how can you fix this? Is it possible? Considering it's been like this with every single game, whether it be Paradox, Fortnite even, League of Legends, everything, once you snowball, you're completely out of control, it might seem impossible. But the only thing I'm going to change is how Golden and Dark Ages work. Have era score be tied to how strong you're getting. Instead of getting era score for finding natural wonders, get era score for every city settled, every district founded, every increase in, I guess, every 10 science or something, I don't know. And instead of having era score be some sort of goal you want to reach, have it be something you don't want to get. If you fill up the bar by settling a lot of cities and getting all those districts and getting wonders, that means you are doing great. Too great, in fact. And because of that, good times create weak men who create weak times, aka a Dark Age. When in a Dark Age, have debuffs to science, production, culture, unit combat strength even, depending on the state of the game and how much stronger you are than everyone else. Have it so that you get maybe a 1% debuff for every 5 points you were over the limit or something like that. And even if you fail to reach a point, then you get... And if you fail to reach a certain point, then you get bonuses to production, food, yields, great people, etc. This is a really good way to prevent people from obliterating the game like student loans obliterate art majors. This only makes the civs out ahead weaker in the long term, as multiple Dark Ages could help everyone catch up to you. But, as the player, you wouldn't want a Dark Age, so you might even give up too much early game expansion and dominance in order to avoid them and instead work towards classical and medieval era Golden Age bonuses. And you can use that strategy to win the game sooner or something. I don't know how it would work, haven't ironed out the details. Hell, maybe in the late game it would make more sense to avoid Dark Ages at that point, as that is probably one of the more critical stages in the game. Plus, for more advanced tactics, you can even use it to see who's doing super well and who isn't, to prepare for an invasion to gobble up a weaker neighbor or coalition neighbor a stronger civ. All in all, I feel like there should be an inverse on Golden/Dark Ages, so if you're doing well, you give others a chance to catch up. In my opinion, it would add in a lot more depth to this game than there already is, and would make it a lot harder to just obliterate the game from turn 50. Barbarians in Civ VI are an absolute menace to all things with a pulse and could be classified as a form of torture. The best strategy in Civilization VI is to prep the night before by shoving a car exhaust up your rectum just to make it easier on you when you boot up Civ the next day. Barbs in this game are insane. Once a scout gets home, which is a lot harder to stop than you would think, they start a massive orgy session, and in 5 to 10 turns, they have so many units you won't even know how they did it. I've seen in the classical era up to 4 man-at-arms, 3 crossbows, and even some pikemen, all games without having Babylon in them, which at the very least would make sense with how barbarians work in this game. It isn't necessarily about difficulty as much as it is how unfun it is. Some people might enjoy dealing with barbarians, however most of us would actually like to run an empire. This one is pretty simple. Just like the disaster screen, have a slider for Civ VI barbarians between 1 to 5. At 1, have up to 3 barbs spawn per scout that reaches the encampment that are 1 tech level lower than the average player. At level 2, have 5 barbs spawn on a lower tech level. At level 3, have 5 barbs spawn that are on the same or even a little higher than the nearest player tech level wise. And then level 4 and 5 can be some sort of Avengers level threat, where you get 30 infantry or even mechanized infantry on turn 10. This gives players the option of choosing if they want to deal with harder barbarians or not. Even with no barbarians being an option, some people want that Civ V barb experience where they were a nuisance, but could never really take half your empire in 10 turns. Finally, the second solution is one where I feel like could be programmed pretty easily without needing for another DLC, and that's to remove the international barbarian scaling. Again, I'm not a programmer, I have no idea how hard this is, so if it is pretty hard, just pretend I didn't say shit. In Civ VI, barbs are all the same. Their units are based on the strongest potential unit that can be built by anyone in the game. If one player is playing Babylon and they get infantry in the classical era, then barbarians will spawn infantry if there's an oil source nearby. And if not, AT crews have fun throwing your swordsmen at that. This is at least something we can all agree on. It isn't fun or necessarily fair to play with this type of game mode on, and unlike city-states, which gets their tech level from the nearby civs around them, barbs all share the same tech level based on the most advanced civ. So if you're playing on deity and having a bad time, Well, hope you got that car exhaust ready. A serious strategy for barbs at the end of it really quick is to just move in a slinger or archer right beside the encampment, because garrison units will immediately see red and actually leave the encampment to chase the early ranged unit down, even if there are other units nearby. Before we get started, comment down below what other problems you have and how you'd fix them, or even the fixes to the problems I have listed in the video. Best one gets pinned. The third problem in Civilization VI is the spear unit line. All of them. This game has two metas. Early game sword/horse rush that works up until the Renaissance era, or waiting until artillery and planes to bomb your enemies into submission. The problem? Spearline units are absolute dog shit, garbage, disgusting, get that out of my sight. The spearman can barely beat a warrior. Scratch that, it cannot beat a warrior unless it's in defensive terrain, making a dildo a better weapon for offensive operations. The next unit is the medieval pikeman, which again gets a -5 combat strength modifier against man-at-arms, making them inferior on all fronts. And the process continues for every era in the game. But pikes are meant for cavalry, right? Well, even with the combat bonus they get, they can still barely beat cavalry who don't have to deal with zone of control and have more movement speed, meaning they can German panzer their way around pikes and beeline the weak ranged units/cities. So what can spearmen be used for? It has to be something. Well, no. Spearline units suck completely, and I'm not even joking. Anything they can do, other units can do much better. The one good spearline unit in the game is the hoplite, and that's only if they have an adjacent unit, and even with all that, they still can only barely go toe-to-toe with swordsmen. And add in a great general, which spearmen aren't able to use, neither are hoplites, even the unique hoplite unit is going to struggle immensely against swordsmen. So, at the end of the day, how do we fix this? I'm gonna need to pull out the biggest hammer in my tool belt to pull this off, just like everyone who leaves a like and subscribes will get their own massive hammer, quote-unquote, and best of all, you won't miss out on future content I post, like this God start I'm gonna be going through tomorrow, same time-ish, so if you don't want to miss out, you know what to do. But all in all, the honest way to fix the spearline units is to make spearmen a classical spearline unit to get the great general bonus, and give them 35 combat strength, just like swordsmen, so at the very least they won't get obliterated. But also give them another 5 combat strength against horsemen, because horsemen are just able to move around spearmen until they actually get some promotions, so making it so that if you get one attack and you could almost two-shot a horseman is going to be a lot better, and at the very least gives you an option if the horseline unit makes a mistake. Now, would swordsmen still be a stronger option overall? Absolutely, but at the very least, spears have a job now. Wipe out any horse-based civ like Scythia or the Mongolians. Another situation is to have a 3-way deadlock and have swordsmen get a -5 debuff against horseline units, which kind of makes historical sense and would reduce the monopoly melee units have on the game because they're the only melee attack type unit that doesn't have a debuff against other classes. Or you could just remove the debuffs entirely and let them duke it out. All good things must come to an end, and I know you're all probably crying at the thought of this being the last Civ VI problem I need to fix, but rest assured, subscribers won't miss any of my future videos as long as I hit the bell. But the last problem is difficulty scaling. The game scales too strong at first, but after you get your strategy down pat, it becomes way too easy to deal with, even on deity. Therefore, here's my unique solution. Have a scaling difficulty slider option. This mode makes everyone start on the same difficulty you selected, but depending on the state of the game, you actually get bonuses or debuffs depending on how you're doing, and it could be the same thing with the AI as well, sort of like the Golden Age mechanic. So after you obliterate the AI on deity and do the things that would make Mao Zedong look like Martin Luther King, you actually get huge debuffs that let the other weaker civs have a shot against you. It's kind of like the Golden Age mechanic, but this one is a lot more harsh and would affect things like combat strength or even production, or maybe even give you specific events, kind of like EU4. This would make the game fun and would scale the difficulty with how bad/good you're doing, even doing things like giving a small boost in science or culture and maybe even free units after reaching a new era. This also helps you deal with atrocious starts, as even on Deity, getting a bad start is a lot different and harder to deal with than a great start. And the difference between these starts isn't really reflected accurately on the victory type, I guess. Although with the reception I get on my impossible starts on Deity, you guys seem to love my suffering. Thank you. The other thing you could do is give the AI boosts every era instead of just the early game, which is the hardest part to deal with, where the AI has all these bonuses against you, but after you catch up, it's much easier to deal with the AI as they don't have an advantage. Giving them boosts every era, whether it be new units, new settlers, buildings, districts, even giving them a massive boost in science or culture, makes the game hard even once you get to the information era, depending on your difficulty type.